Hey, welcome here today. Absolutely chuffed, and I am chuffed actually, because this is my first webinar of the new year. Just to tote, I'm not going to tell you the year actually. If somebody watches this in 2026, I'm still going to pretend this was the first webinar. But I am absolutely delighted to have with me Morgan Young today of Roboteer, as we can see there from the top. How are you, Morgan? You okay?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, absolutely great. Looking forward to even the first sign of sun today, which I haven't seen in about 6 weeks. So I'm feeling unusually bouncy, and that's for me. Roboteer, first of all, fantastic name. Obviously, we know they're all going to take over and destroy us at one stage, but you've got to get the benefit out of them until that point of sentience, haven't we? Our title of today is even better than that: Roboteer, Digital Workers for Property Management. So, Morgan, could you just give us a really brief overview, let people know what they're going to be? We're going to obviously go into it in a bit more detail, but tell the people listening why they should be, you know, what Roboteer is about and what problems it's going to solve for people out there.
Yeah, of course. So we specialize in building digital workers and putting them into your business. So really what they are is software automations that complete tasks on a computer, just like a human would, that tend to be really, really repetitive and often quite boring. So we found that when we were looking at various property management companies, there's lots of repetitive tasks that go on. That's stuff like raising works orders or uploading invoices or dealing with credit control, any of that stuff. And it really involves people doing a lot of those manual tasks repetitively, like day after day, sometimes spending like most of their time on it when really they'd be better suited to being on the phone with clients or tenants or whoever, or doing other stuff that's really kind of more important to the business itself in terms of revenue generation. So we build these digital workers, and they basically take over the boring and repetitive tasks that humans don't want to do, and then let your normal staff team focus on really really important work. So that's it in a nutshell.
So this is critical, isn't it? I mean, one of the first things that whenever look, we'll come back to this in a minute, but I can guess there's already people shouting out there, oh God, this is all about the AI and it's about replacing jobs and everything else here. You know, that point about does digital workers mean that there aren't going to be human staff? It absolutely isn't that case, is it? What we're talking about here is about, as you said, often anyway, stopping them doing the mundane tasks that people don't want to do anyway, that aren't going to be done as accurately as something like Roboteer can do. And most importantly, freeing those people up to do more dollar productive tasks. Is that, am I getting that right? A sense of that right?
That's basically the gist of it. Yeah, like it's a common, like you said at the start, it's a common fear, but we've never had anyone like lay off any staff because of a digital worker or anything like that. If you can picture it, the usual situation that someone finds themselves in when they start using one of our digital workers and working with us is that they have an agency, they're really, really busy as it is. So their staff are often complaining that they're overworked, etc. Like the work that they're doing is very boring and they don't have much kind of autonomy over what they do because they're just stuck on invoice uploading all day or debt collections all day or whatever. And really they want to be talking to people on the phone or going out and doing viewings or whatever it is. So for that, it kind of makes sense to use a digital worker at like 1/10 of the price of what a human would cost or something like that, to just handle the boring work and then let your staff do the exciting stuff. Really, that is the gist of it. So yeah, no robots coming for anyone's jobs. It's really just kind of using it on the side to make your day-to-day life a bit better and easier, really.
Yeah, and a bit more fulfilling ultimately. And look, what we're talking about here is just doing what tech's meant to do, right? It's, you know, about doing more with less, isn't it? That's the absolutely critical point that we're getting back to. I'm going to throw a stat out here, one of the case study things. I always ask people to give us something that, you know, is going to catch people's attention, because I know I'll be honest, I know I've got a monotone voice and people tend to fall asleep if I don't catch their attention. So you came back and we were talking off screen before, that one of your clients, a block management company that used to spend 20 hours a week of manual time, obviously as that process and that job entails, uploading invoices into their system, that's half of, you know, that's a full half of someone's full-time job. Now with one of your digital workers, they spend 0 hours a week doing it. The digital worker handles everything. I'm imagining a few people have woken up or and paid attention now. Anything to add on that? I mean, it says enough on the tin, as they say.
Yeah, it's an interesting stat, isn't it? Basically, how that worked was there was a time where this block manager, they're quite a large company, they were getting invoices in from their contractors left, right, and center, and then having to put them onto their blocks manually. That was a big problem, because not only did they have to do the manual work, they also had to collate all of these invoices from the contractors, which was tricky and time consuming.
Yeah.
So what we did was basically turned it around on the contractors, provided a really easy to access, easy to use form where they can upload their invoices. So then all of a sudden the uploading of the invoices to the supplying of the invoices to the block management company has now gone away in terms of time spent by their staff, because the contractors are doing it themselves. And then following that, we put in a digital worker to actually upload those invoices onto the block within the block management system. So that's how it works. And yeah, as you can see, then that doesn't take any human time, because they're not collating the invoices and they're not entering them into the system. And people love it. It's one of the support team's favorite automations. They had a few with us, like a few digital workers, and you know they're still really busy, but they're really busy because people are calling them and talking about various things, or they're doing other jobs. They're just not stuck doing invoice uploading all day. So yeah, it's been.
Let's be really honest about this, Morgan. One of the things you're talking about here is so often, again, you can almost hear the eye roll of people out there. Here's another bit of tech. Always meant to actually save your work and save your time and help you do more. And actually, it feels like it just adds into the list of things. You know, the tech stacks are very, very bloated. A lot of people feel here. And what you're seemingly telling us here is actually there is here is not out of the box, because we're going to come into that in a bit more detail. And everything you do is bespoke around. Obviously, a large part of what you do is bespoke around finding out the right touch points, the right jobs that are taking currently a lot of work within the businesses. But literally, that's the end result. Is it can save you that much time and energy. And so, look, it's very, very. It's probably unlikely that somebody doing that kind of admin role is going to be able to be put into a sales prospecting role to actually generate stuff. But they can certainly do much more productive stuff, can't they? Which was what we were talking about a second ago. I'm going to go into, I always quote this, which is, I don't know if you've seen the film Margin Call, which is where Jeremy Irons is in there. And he says famously, where he's the CEO, and he says, speak to me as you might a young child or as a golden retriever. So I'm very conscious that you're obviously a techie, and you're doing a fantastic job talking to me at the moment, explaining this. But all I want to understand is, what's the difference between a digital worker and a system that I kind of understand the benefits of without the detail of something like a Zapier, which, as I understand it, is what they call middleware that sits between packages. Could you just give us a bit of an overview of that at top level?
Yeah, very good question. So we get compared a lot to tools like Zapier, and basically how they work is they can do jobs. So they integrate with certain tools that have integrations available, or you can build your own, and then they do things. So they might take a record from your CRM and put it into an Excel sheet, or vice versa, or when then they'll update another system for you and all that kind of stuff, which is really helpful. And you can stack them up and they can be quite long. But the difference between a tool like Zapier or any of these other kind of integration tools is that we do integrate with systems and we make systems talk to each other, but we also automate all of the tasks that are in there. So one of the good things about us is that we can integrate with basically any system that's accessed from the internet. Yeah. So we don't need to have necessarily an official integration. We can work with usernames, passwords, we can work with user accounts, we can work with APIs. We have a vast array of ways that we can make systems talk to each other. Yeah. And then we actually carry out the workflows that you do yourself manually. So that really is the difference, that we're not just making something happen in the system when something else happens over there. Yeah. We are taking it into account and being like, look, you have this credit control system that you work on. every day you go through it and you find all of the people in it that are more than double their rent amount in arrears, and then you do this thing with them, and then you send an email to this person, and then you do this and you do that. Those are the types of workflows that we automate, and often that involves various systems talking to each other, but it's basically more kind of automating a workflow than just kind of integrating different things together.
So provided there's some logic around it, you can build those kind of processes around it there, as you said before, if something is double the amount or stuff like that. And just so I understand, you mentioned there any kind of web-based systems. What about if people have got desktop systems, you know, because a lot of people will have legacy packages and things like that. Is that possible, or is that a no-no?
It is possible. It very much depends, because legacy systems come with legacy problems.
Yeah.
And it really kind of depends how they're built, what systems they are, etc. But we usually work with online vendors, to be honest. We find it's more reliable, it's more accurate, it's faster, generally a better experience for everyone involved. But yeah, that's the gist of.
Cool. I'll tell people, yeah, you've got to get into the 21st century, people. Come on, you know.
Yeah.
Help the fella out here. Yeah. Talk to me about where do you see your position? I mean, it's obviously in the prop tech market. I mean, it's such an exciting area to go on. But I've mentioned before that you do get to see a few people roll their eyes when they hear yet another prop tech solution. Where do you see yourselves fitting in?
It's really interesting because, yeah, when we were looking at starting this, we were talking to various people in the industry. They were wanting us to build something like a new block management system, like a better one, all this kind of stuff. But we didn't want to make it a hassle or build something that would be a hassle for providers, for agencies and properties or companies in the property market.
Yeah.
To onboard and have to deal with the headache of onboarding that and then migrating your stuff over from a different platform and all the rest of it. So we thought, why don't we just put something in that's easy to work out, easy to run, no hassle for the people involved, there's no migration, it sits over the top of every system you have at the moment. And if you have a system or a process that involves multiple systems talking to each other, then you can make that work with one of our digital workers. You don't have to have some other brand new system that's got all the bells and whistles. It's great if you have that, and we do integrate with platforms as well. We have official integrations, but you don't need to have this brand new system. We can work with what you've got is the message, really. So there's no kind of adding to the tech stack. It's just, do you want a person doing the manual work, or do you want an automation doing it instead?
But if I was just kind of, again, simplistically highlight that, this strikes me then you're almost the glue between a lot of these systems in there. And, you know, we spoke about the fact that there is this tech stack, which often are quite unstable because they're just bricks put on top of bricks, put on bricks. This is about actually pulling that stuff together. Hopefully at its absolute core, just stopping rekeying between packages and things like that. But is that right? Is that the kind of approach that you kind of see yourselves going forwards with?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way to describe it, actually, being the glue between the various systems that people have. Because oftentimes our digital workers will span multiple systems. If you can imagine, you've got to enter something in one system, you've then got to take it into another system and then send someone an email, for example.
Yeah.
You can't get a tool off the shelf that will automate that for you. So it's stuff like that we specialize in. When people perform tasks across various systems, then we can make that work, we can glue it all together, and then you've got a fully automated workflow, basically.
And look, that's 99% of the industry, right? There's no one system to rule them all out there, isn't it? Even companies that have gone down the kind of Salesforce approach, you know, will still be using packages outside of that, as good as their kind of integrations are. Speaking of integration, who are you integrating with at the moment? What's your approach on partnerships and integration?
Very good question. So we mentioned before desktop software. So there are some desktop providers that we can integrate with via official APIs and partnerships. So one of the recent partnerships that we've announced is a partnership with Reapit. So Reapit is obviously, as people will know if they use it, is a desktop-based platform, but now we have official partnership status, then we can access that through their API, and we're building a range of tools on there to help people out as digital workers. Reapit is the one that we're focusing on at the moment. The idea is that we're going to speak to a few property management companies, and we are doing at the moment in a consultation period, to build some really, really helpful digital workers that then we can put out there and market on a mass basis. We're also looking at some other integrations with other property platforms and kind of property adjacent platforms. People like Fixflow is one that we're actively talking to and looking at the moment. So that could be very helpful. Aside from that, we don't necessarily publish all of the systems that we integrate with, because we don't really have like a set list. And this is one of the things that makes us quite helpful, I think, is that if you come to us and you say, look, I have this system that I use, I log into it, I need to take this thing and then do this with it in this system and carry out my workflow, etc., then we can look to automate that system for you as and when we come to it. So we're not really restricted by partnerships. We can work with most online platforms once we've had a look and gotten familiar with it.
Well, I've got a list as long as your arm, I think, of people I know, partners that on the supplier side who you could and should be talking to. So we'll catch up separately on there. Talk to us though how the agents, or indeed actually anyone coming to you, how do you get the ball started? I can, how do they get to that wonderful stage we just spoke about, that case study with 20 hours saved, half of an entire job? How does the process work? How does the process work?
Good question. We like to think it's quite straightforward and has multiple benefits for the agent coming to us. So the first thing to note is that we automate processes and we deploy digital workers to work on processes. And for that, your process needs to have pretty good documentation. They usually don't.
Yeah, I was going to say you'd love to think that was the case everywhere, wouldn't you? So
yeah, they usually don't, which is fine. But the first step is working with the person that's come to us to work out what their process actually is. As you alluded to earlier, a big part of our process work is logic. So it doesn't have to be complicated, but we have to understand why you're making decisions and why you're doing certain tasks in the process.
The classic kind of if this, then that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you imagine some kind of branching, like logical branching kind of pattern, we have to know why you're doing things. Because if we're telling an automation to do it, a digital worker, then we have to know what triggers what, essentially. Which also comes with the benefit of then you having a really nicely designed process diagram of your process that you didn't exactly know how it worked before, which is helpful. From there, after we've got the process down to a T, then we start to automate it and we start to look at building the digital worker for you. Once that's done, then we'll test it out. Everyone has 2 weeks free to use it in their real agency, make sure it works, make sure they're happy with everything. The vast majority of the time, it works fine. But what people come back to us and say is, oh yeah, this is great. We really like this, but we just thought about this as well.
Yeah.
And like, can we do this instead? Like I forgot to mention it in the first part when we were designing the process.
You roll your eyes and say, yeah, of course. I wish you'd mentioned at the beginning, but I suppose one of the key things there is lots of people will get caught into a way of doing things just because that's always been the way manually, and ostensibly once you realize you can move away, just because you've always done it that way, it doesn't mean you have to do that going forwards. And there will be just genuine efficiency gains just on that basis, won't there?
Exactly. So there are two parts really to the first bit about defining the process. The first bit is trying to lean out the process as much as possible. So if you're doing things that are inefficient or have like multiple systems involved where they don't need to be, or any of this stuff, then we look to always lean it out before we start to automate it. So there's that kind of business analysis partnership that we have with all the people that work with us too. And then once we've got that down, like I said, then they can suggest changes. We can make sure it's perfect for those 2 weeks of the trial. And then they just move on to a monthly subscription after that. So there's no contract and they don't pay a penny until they're absolutely happy with it and they're sure they want to use it. Because we don't
Really.
We don't want people kind of paying for something and using it if it's not right for them. So want to make sure it's perfect at the start and then just pay monthly.
And you're one of those wonderful suppliers that really you can point towards. Some companies suffer with being able to show the ROI because it's intangible, but actually the whole crux of your existence is to be able to say, we've saved you X amount of time and energy, and you just run that against the payroll, and the sums are simple, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. So the ROI tends to win itself back like pretty easily. Property management is, I think, a really good example of this, because we work with our one of the best block managers we work with in terms of the amount of time we've saved for them. One of the first processes we introduced as a digital worker was for logging charges against accounts. So that's things like lost keys, late direct debit payments, all that kind of stuff. It's actually the case study on our website. Basically what happened there was they recouped something like 4 or 5 months of cost of running the digital worker when it ran for the first time, because obviously you're raising fees. You're raising fees for people that lose their key fobs and late payments and this kind of stuff. So that's a revenue generating automation, and stuff like that. It's so clear to see the return.
I do like your slightly overconfident smile, because what's brilliant is you're seeing obviously the feedback here from the case studies, aren't you? Which is just so easily justifying what you're about, and that's really, really great to understand it there. How do they know if they've got a big problem though, Morgan? I think most people will instinctively know that there's parts of their business that can be automated there. Are there any kind of red flags though, in terms of for people that should desperately trying to speak to you?
I think if you're having people work on a system that you have, like a CRM or something different, and you've got someone who works on that platform like 40 hours a week, sits at their desk, never closes that window, and they're just working on it every single day, like you should probably come and talk to us about what they're doing. And it's especially if they're stressed, or if they're unhappy, or if you have other things that you think they could be doing instead, then it's a really good opportunity to come and have a chat with us if you feel like someone's in that position. We do have quite a good amount of consultancy that we do as well. So we try and work out which is the highest value process to automate first. The reason I say first is that the vast majority of our clients have more than one automation, but we do quite a lot of work up front to make sure they start with the most time intensive one, because we want to get that kind of out of the way first.
Get that low hanging fruit. We'll get the biggest returns back from that.
Yeah.
And just, again, excuse me because of my lack of understanding with this, but do you just get one, essentially one Roboteer, one digital worker doing one specific job, or can they, does one digital worker do many things? How does that aspect hang together?
Yeah, good question. So they tend to do one process. So they will take over one process from a person and free them up to do something else. So that process may be invoice uploading, it may be raising works orders, anything that is very repetitive. And it would be kind of a one-to-one basis, really. So you have one process that you do, then you have one digital worker for that. So that tends to be how it works. But you can have as many as you want, and like I said, the vast majority of our clients have more than one.
And do you get an economies of scale if you get multiple workers, or how does that work on the commercial side?
You can do, it depends on how intensive they are and what the process is, to be honest. So we do price things on a sliding scale. The vast majority of our digital workers fall within the range of £250 to £500 a month. So on a kind of a non-contractual basis. And if you compare that to what you pay to onboard a new employee to do the job, obviously it's a lot less than that. But how that works.
I was going to say how critical it was for me to ask there, because it's not as if just because you hire 10 workers you start getting the other ones cheaper, do you? That's not how it works in the real world.
No, very true. But we like to present good value, and the start of that is making sure that we're doing processes that are actually worth automating. So that's a big piece. But if you do want something else, just because the first one was £500 because it was quite complicated, It doesn't mean the next one won't be £250 a month because it's less complicated and shorter. So we always have to bear in mind, because it's bespoke, it really depends on what the digital worker is doing.
Yeah.
But basically, as long as you're having someone work on a process for more than around probably 5 hours a week, it'll probably be beneficial, and the cost will recoup itself pretty quick.
That's really, really interesting. Can I throw a kind of, we didn't practice this off stage, but can I just throw a what if scenario at you? And you tell me whether that's the kind of thing that can be possible or whether it's outside of the remit. So one of the things that I keep highlighting, that, you know, everyone keeps talking about things like AI and, you know, how they all know the kind of what they can get out of it and everything else. One of the biggest problems is it's only as good as the information and the data source that you're pulling information from a lot of the time. And I've got to say, across all CRMs, the quality of data often at its base source is quite poor. So missing postcodes, missing the full address, missing, you know, the title on things. If you were to throw a data source like that from one of the CRMs, could it go through and clear up like the postcodes and things like that? Or is that, I mean, is that a classic case study that you could throw at it? Or is that outside of it? Does that need human eyes to have a look over?
It's a good question. I think there are some things that a digital worker could do for something like that. It's probably more of a one-off job, but if you look at it as kind of a case study of, is it possible and is it good for automation? I think the answer is yes. Like you can look at postcodes, you can look at address formats, you can detect how many lines the address is split over, you can see if the postcode is missing or if it's spaced properly, etc. So there's a lot of good things that we can do with data quality. To provide you an example, so one of the we do have a few off-the-shelf automations for context. One of them is we call it a postal service. So it essentially, for any units that require manual post, it can go into your system, find the letters that have been raised, download them, and then send them off electronically, and they'll get posted out to them physically. So we have an automation that does that for a digital worker. And one of the main problems when you do that is you're working with information in a CRM where people haven't got the postcodes properly, they haven't formatted the address correctly, you know, and then it's partly a kind of informative process to go through with them, where you say this is why it's important that it's like that, because then we can do this thing with it, but also we can then help to fix those problems moving forward. And that's something that we did with the people that used that automation. Kind of went through and did an initial grab of all of the units that were incorrectly formatted, and then, you know, we can do various things from there. So yeah, the possibilities are almost endless.
Well, that's what I'm getting from it. I think that's amazing. And so, given what you're telling us there and the size and scale, how much time and money do you think this can save agents? Are you able to approximate dealing with the business what you feel you can do? It's it must be quite how long is a piece of string, I suppose. But what can you work on that basis?
Yeah, it is tricky. It really depends how many hours a week someone's spending on a process, and then obviously how many processes that a company automates with us via digital workers. So obviously, if you have 5 digital workers, you'll spend a lot more money than if you had 1. And it's not always linear, because some can do a lot more than others in terms of the length and complexity of the process. But essentially, if you're having someone work on a process more than probably 4-5 hours a week, so looking at kind of 20 hours a month, it's probably worth automating. In terms of an exact ROI, it would be tricky to say, but when you take into account the amount of time, the amount of money you're paying someone for 5 hours a week of work, when you get up to around that's usually when, at our minimum of £250 a month, then it presents a good value.
And those classic, I think you get it the other angle, that there are job roles that are obviously by definition more monotonous, more, you know, doing the same thing. So you mentioned before property management, I'm guessing administration. These ones are the ones you would deviate to straight away, wouldn't you? I would imagine, to trying to get that.
Yeah, exactly. And when we look at these processes, it's coming back to your earlier point about kind of robots taking people's jobs. The biggest champions for getting us in and getting us involved in automating something isn't necessarily the bosses of the companies. It's the people who are doing the work.
Yeah.
So the people who are doing this invoice uploading don't want to be doing it for 20 hours a week, you know, and that's the truth of it. Regardless of what people hear about robots and tech and stuff, it's the people doing the job who are the most happy with our results, really.
That's great. So look, anyone looking out there, tired of all the endless stuff you're doing, reach out to obviously Morgan and ourselves. And the solution is in sight, let's just say. And it's a brave new world tomorrow, isn't it? So, I mean, first and foremost, I think it's an obvious one here. And knowing obviously that client base like I do so well, repeat clients do tend to have a lot of users. They tend to certainly as well. A lot of them are managing huge amounts of properties as well. So there's a double bonus in there in terms of that economies of scale that you're going to get off the back of that, aren't you? So they should be really they should be beating a quick route to your door really to try and find out on this. It's really, really interesting. And so first port of call, let's just deal with next steps. Obviously, I don't think there's going to be too many people here who feel completely confident that they are, that they're being as efficient as possible. First point of call is to obviously have a look at your website and then to reach out to yourselves. Of course, people, don't forget, go to Roboteer as a landing page on kerfuffle.com. Go in there. I think you've already got your first 5-star review, which is fantastic. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of those if I'm not mistaken on there as well. And how does that first conversation look then, Morgan? Is it literally just talking through some of these case studies and then saying, actually, I've got an idea that might work for us as well?
Yeah. So when people go onto our site, they'll be able to see some digital workers that are off the shelf, if you like. So those are for very repetitive standard processes that we know affect a lot of people in property management. There are niches. Obviously, plot management is one that we work with on a probably a majority scale, but we're open to everything property related. So if you see anything on there that resonates with you off the shelf, let us know and just you can fill in the form to book a chat and we can have that conversation. And then that looks at what systems you use, how exactly your process works specifically, what steps you take, all that kind of stuff. If you don't see anything that resonates with you, or you have a process in mind that you want to automate, or you want some help in stopping yourself and your team from kind of drowning in the work that you're doing and finding a good process to automate and a good place to start, then book a call and then we can have a chat. And this is kind of really where the consulting begins. So we understand that people have lots of processes that they don't like, but it's really important that we find the ones that are not only difficult and like a pain for people to complete, but they're also based on decision making and logic that we can copy ourselves. So we work with you to find those processes, and then we try and look at the impact that they'd have if they were automated and try and find a starting point. That's usually where the first call goes, if that makes sense.
Real. And you've been really, really kind as well. So for Kerfuffle members as well, on that basis, make sure you do mention it, obviously, when you catch up with Morgan, that you've been really, obviously, if they choose to go ahead, you get your first month free as part of that digital worker service as well.
Yeah, exactly. So you'd get the normal kind of 2-week trial period that everyone gets. So that'll be using it in your agency, using it live and on the main systems. And then after those 2 weeks are up, you'll then get a month for free. Yeah. And then you just go on to a rolling contract. So if you don't like it, then you don't have to keep using it. Very flexible there.
I suppose the digital worker's not going to sob about being sacked, are they, in the same way that a human worker would be? And look, coming back to it again, you're not having to worry about holidays, pensions. This is the future now. And if you're not, I keep making this point, isn't it? Is you can be, I think you can be questioning it, concerned because you don't have all the answers. But this is a wave, it is coming, and you're either on top of that wave, you certainly don't want to be underneath it. And the simple truth is, and tell me again if I'm wrong, I'm sure I'm not on this point, an agency that is working with your digital workers and Roboteer working very efficiently will genuinely have a strategic advantage over somebody who is working more manually.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. And the first bit that you mentioned around, like no pension, no holiday pay, that's absolutely true. So obviously you don't have any of that. And generally these digital workers are a lot faster, a lot more accurate at things like data entry than a person would be. But as we said before, you're still going to have your staff, and your staff aren't going to be scared that they're going to lose their jobs because automation is coming. It's just taking away the bits of their jobs that are really boring, and then they can focus on other things, or other less repetitive and more enjoyable aspects of the job. And to be honest, I don't think we've spoken to someone who runs a property agency that doesn't have things in mind that their staff could be doing apart from like hammering away at a keyboard and raising work orders and stuff like that.
Have you ever spoken to any? Have you ever spoken to somebody where it hasn't been possible? I mean, I'm struggling to understand a business that doesn't have one job that is more than 5 hours or whatever a week. Is it? But has that come up? Or am I being simplistic there?
No, we have spoken to people who haven't gone ahead and haven't decided to work with us. I think the main thing, to be honest, is the size of the company. So if a company is larger, then it naturally takes more to get through the red tape and the people you need to speak to get something done. That's generally why we work with, like, doesn't have to be like 2, 3, 4, 5 people. We have some relatively large ones, but we talk to the people who are not only doing the jobs, but also the people who have the keys, if you like. So as long as they're kind of a small or medium-sized company, it generally tends to be quite positive. The only thing that's trickier is when large companies come to us, and then they naturally have a larger tech stack. They might have developers internally in their company, or people they already use. Tends to get a bit messier. But if you're a smaller company or medium-sized company in property, then it's usually a goer.
Yeah, the problem with the bigger ones is they'll try and do the whole thing, won't they? They'll try and get, the classic let perfect get in the way of better. And that's the issue there, is they'll be so amorphous that you won't be able to. And I'm guessing what you suggest is, let's start with that priority one, understand the scope and the way that you deal with these digital workers, and then you move on to the next as and when you're getting it working correctly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that we hear quite a lot, again, if people don't go ahead, is that, oh, well, I can do half of this in the system now myself, and in a couple of months they're going to be bringing out another feature that allows us to bulk upload all of these invoices, so we're not going to need it. That's another kind of reason we hear why people don't go ahead. But the vast majority of the time, as I'm sure working at Kerfuffle, seeing all the different software that's out there, things very rarely get done on time, especially when you're working with a larger software platform. These features that come out, they have a massive customer base to deal with. They have loads of different stakeholders involved from every angle, and it's very, very difficult to rely on your feature, the one you want to see, being built and being prioritized. So if you don't want to wait for that, that's another good reason to use us. If you've been promised some kind of bulk upload system for your invoices that's coming in the next month, and it's been like that for a year and a half now, then
Yeah, woulda, coulda, shoulda. What was the old phrase here? It'll be weeks rather than months when it's going to be released, and then it never does. Yeah, I understand that. And because I'm always super keen, and I'm a bit like Andy out of Little Britain, I want that one. Clearly, I can see the advantage of this. How long does the process not? And again, I understand each one is different, but from starting those initial conversations with you to rolling out a digital worker, what are we talking about in terms of weeks, months?
Yeah, so from the initial conversation to the time of going live, unless it's exceptionally complicated, the process that you're carrying out, because that's really what matters, is the difficulty, the decision points, the complexity in the process is really what makes it longer or shorter. Unless it's exceptionally complicated, then it would be within a month, usually within 2.5 weeks.
That is amazing. Well, considering we're in January, as I said there, and you're looking at the outlook for 2024, just to again date ourselves here, you could be looking at literally getting something in place for the vast majority of the rest of the year and changing your your whole resourcing and, dare I say it, your profit margins for the year ahead, in what we know, again, going back to it, we are all in the middle of a cost of living crisis. So this is one antidote to that very real inflationary environment we're in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, like I said, you're working with, it's me and Alex as well, my co-founder. We do all of the automation development ourselves. So you're not dealing with a kind of a large outsourced team where it's going to get complicated to communicate what you want. You communicate it to us, we build it, and that's one of the reasons why it can be done so quickly.
Well, let me say this straight away. Look, I mean, obviously you're new in terms of me. Obviously, we've only really just met and everything else. You've already got started getting the first reviews, as I said, on the website. But what I can clearly see is, if you continue down that path, you're going to be in that very, very narrow and exclusive club of suppliers that are genuine partners with a business, rather than just being suppliers to a business. And that's a wonderful place to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that would be great. And we definitely see that with the clients that we have on board at the moment. And I think if we could extend that out to the rest of the Kerfuffle community, that'd be amazing. Yeah.
Oh, they're great, the Kerfuffle community. You're going to love them. Honestly, they're great. They're fantastic. And again, just to reiterate, if you are the Kerfufflers, that month free thereafter the trial is obviously going to be gold dust to you guys. I'm going to just summarize it now then, Morgan, if that's all right. So the three key takeaways, as far as I'm saying: look, digital workers help perform those boring, repetitive 24/7, 365 tasks, so that your staff can do more productive things. Dead easy, number one, the most obvious one. But on top of that, you've got a really flexible model, so you don't do contracts. It's a month-to-month subscription that you can cancel whenever you want. So this isn't about, it's not going to work out for us and then you're tied into 18 months, or let's just say some of those longer multi-year deals that you're on top of. And then that last one, just to describe the nuance as well. Digital workers can't really be compared to something like a Zapier, because they can perform those human-like workflows on systems that Zapier simply can't access. That's the big differentiator. If someone's thinking, oh, I can just plug it into a tool like that. Is that would be right? Crucially, you tell me, have I missed anything out in terms of what we've spoken about today?
No, I don't think so. I think that's absolutely correct.
Well, that's a first for me then.
We're a full service
kind of
automation shop.
Morgan, I've really enjoyed it. I'll tell you what I'd love to do as well. When you've got one of those case studies who's willing to talk about it, I'd love to jump on board with them and get this feedback, because it sounds really, really exciting. What I think is brilliant about this whole tech revolution, evolution, no, it is a revolution, isn't it? Genuinely, in this one is that you're starting to see things. Sometimes the payback can be over months, can be over years. It can be difficult to quantify. That's just not the case here at all. And that's something that really does excite me in terms of what people can do. For today, Morgan, I'm going to say thank you very much. And thanks for joining us on here and indeed on Kerfuffle.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks.